The year was 2018. I sat my A-level exams and I got CCD in maths, biology, and chemistry. I didn't get into uni. Why did I fail? I failed because I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to approach exams and what the best studying technique was. I used to spend time rereading the textbook and highlighting notes. I thought this was me being productive, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. Then I came across these 5 study tips that I'm about to share with you. Some of these study tips I came across by being on YouTube and watching YouTubers such as Ali Abdal. And some of these tips I figured out myself. And using these strategies, I resat my A-levels the following year and I got AAB and I eventually got into university. I went on to study neuroscience at the University of Nottingham where I earned my first degree. And now I'm studying medicine. I'm a current second year medical student. After you finish watching this video, you can immediately begin to apply what I've taught you and start seeing the results I did. You'll be able to recall information better. You'll learn the secrets of why top students get the grades that they do. And more importantly, you'll gain freedom. Freedom how? You'll get the top grades, and with this, you'll have all your options open to decide what you want to study in the future. So let's get into it. So the first technique I want to talk about is spaced repetition. And this is something I learned from Ali. So what is spaced repetition? It's simply the ability to recall information at spaced intervals. So for example, if you're studying a biology concept like action potentials, depending on how well you did, so let's say you covered action potentials today and you did poorly, right? So the next time you will cover that topic again will be tomorrow. But if you did really, really well, then you might cover that topic again in 3 days. Well, why does spaced repetition work? What benefit does it have for you? So let's start by introducing the forgetting curve. So the forgetting curve, what it does is it tells us how our memory exponentially decays over time. In other words, we rapidly forget information as soon as we've learnt it. And this is where spaced repetition works, you see. It leverages on this forgetting curve because by going over information just as it's on the verge of being forgotten, it then resets the decay of the memory. And over time, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with that memory. And it's this process that shifts memory from the short term into our long-term memory. So you might think, why can't I just cram for an exam? Isn't that good enough, or isn't that a better option? Plus, it's less time consuming than spaced repetition. The reason why I'd suggest against this is because it doesn't lead to long-term retention. Imagine as soon as you finish your exam, you walk out that exam hall and you've just forgotten every single thing you've learned. And this is terrible because imagine you're studying a subject like medicine, right? Where the information is so vital and important that you need to remember that information for the rest of your career, right? And secondly, cramming places a lot of stress on you. Imagine having to cover an entire syllabus of A-level chemistry or biology in a single week. That sounds so overwhelming. No one wants to do that. Therefore, it's much better to break it down and do it across a whole year than compared to just cramming and doing it in that 1 week. So in the next strategy that I give you, I'm going to go over exactly how you can incorporate spaced repetition into your study routine and some of the apps that you can use. So next up is active recall. So active recall is simply the ability to retrieve information without looking at a textbook or a guide. It's just your own brain power, seeing how much you can actually recall from memory. So a good example of active recall is using flashcards. How do flashcards utilize active recall? Well, because on one side you have a question and on the other side you have the answer. So when you look at a flashcard, you're presented with a question which requires you to think deeply about the answer and what it is asking you. And so after getting the answer correct, then you flip to the other side to see what the actual answer was. By having the answer on the other side, you force yourself from memory to try your best to guess the answer. Why is active recall so useful? Because again, it leverages on strengthening the neural pathways associated with that memory. Over time, this strengthens that memory itself. Now, active recall and spaced repetition are both linked, and I'll go into a bit more detail on how you can use both of them at the same time to improve your study routine and get the grades that you want. I'll try my best to break it down for you. So here's what I do, okay? So I use the app called Study Smarter. Now, it's a flashcard making app, and I think it's one of the best apps out there that you can use for your study routine. So what I simply do is I open up the app and I go and create a new deck. Now, this can be anything. You can label it biology topic 1, biology topic 2, chemistry, whatever. So pick a topic and label the deck. Now, once you've labeled the deck, you open the deck up and you can begin creating flashcards. So for example, let's say I'm creating a flashcard. On the question side, I would write something like, what is the cell membrane made of? And then on the flip side, I'll write the answer, lipids, transporter proteins, cholesterol. Beauty about this app is that it integrates spaced repetition automatically. You don't have to go through the process of thinking, oh, like I did poorly, so I need to manually write down, I'm going to review this in 3 days. This does it all for you depending on how well you were able to recall that information from the flashcard. Does that make sense? So let's say now you've done making the flashcards and you click on the flashcard. You will immediately see that there's a question, right? The question that you've written out. Now, of course, this question is going to get you to think about the answer. If you get the answer correctly, you click on the flashcard and this will give you a bunch of options. Now, if it was really, really difficult for you, then you can click on bad or like the unhappy frowny face. But if it was easy for you, then you click on the happy face. And if you clicked on like the sad face or you did poorly, then you'll get a notification tomorrow saying you need to review this card immediately. Whereas if you clicked on the happy face, this card will come back to you again in 3 days. And over time, if you keep getting this card correctly, so let's say 3 days later, you come across this card again, the next interval would be something like 7 days. Then after that, it could be a month, 2 months, 3 months, because you keep getting it right. That's spaced repetition in action. Also, just a quick side note, before you decide to make flashcards, it's important to understand the concept deeply, because I've seen people so many times make flashcards, right, about questions and answers, but they simply don't understand the concept. So what they're doing is something called rote memorization, which is just forcing your brain to remember concepts instead of understanding. So I suggest you first understand completely what the concept is, and then you go ahead and make the flashcards, because it's just going to make your life so much harder trying to make questions and answers when you don't understand the concept. Now, I think that the more you understand, the easier it will be to remember, because once you understand it, everything is just logical after that. So it's much, much easier to remember. But it's pretty hard if you don't understand it and you're just trying to remember it. That is not feasible at all. And yeah, that's how easy it is to make flashcards. The third strategy, which is one of my personal favorites, it's called the Feynman technique. And again, this is one of the strategies I came across from Ali. Now, the Feynman technique in a nutshell says that if you understand a topic deeply or well enough, then you'll be able to explain it to a 5-year-old or a child or someone who is unfamiliar with the topic itself. Now, why is it relevant? Why are we trying to teach some kid about a concept in A-level chemistry? What relevance does that possibly have? And how can that help us as students? Now, the reason being, in simplifying the concept or distilling that complex information into something much more simple for a child to understand, it forces you to gain a better understanding of the concept itself. Now, if we're making the concept so simple, why would that help us? Because in the process of making the concept simple, you might come across gaps in your information, right? You might come across things that you don't know. And these gaps are so important because this will highlight what you don't know about that concept. So you can go back to the textbooks and go over it and try and understand your best and then come back again. Now, what if you don't have someone to explain it to? What if you don't have a child or a 5-year-old in your house? Well, one of the best things about this is you don't really need someone. Now, what I personally do is I don't often have someone to explain something to that's unfamiliar with their concept. When I'm at my kitchen table, I just imagine someone's there sitting opposite me and I'll just simply speak aloud. I will explain the concept loudly to myself and hopefully that person will understand what I'm talking about. Now, of course, this isn't a one-size-fits-all technique, so just feel free to experiment with it and see if it works for you or not. Another technique I would suggest is if you don't like speaking out loud or being verbal about it, then you can simply just write it all out. Everything you know about that topic, just write it out. And this is another technique. This is called blurting. So blurting and Feynman technique are quite similar, except from the part that the Feynman technique is more verbal, whereas blurting is just simply writing things out. I hope that makes sense. So next I want to talk about is mnemonics. Don't kill precious Kremen or fantastic grades suffer. What the fuck does that mean? So when I was in year 12, one of my year 12 biology teachers, Mr. Kremen, he taught us this mnemonic: don't kill precious Kremen or fantastic grades suffer. This was to help us remember the taxonomic rank. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Now you can see how effective mnemonics is because this was something I was taught 6 years ago, back when I was in year 12. And mnemonics are simply just memory aids. They're just tools to help you remember a certain sequence of events or something like I did, like the taxonomic rank. Now, the key to making a good mnemonic is you have to be really, really creative. And I recommend the dirtier the mnemonic, the better, because it will just stick in your mind, right? So just think of anything crazy, and that's literally like the best way to create a mnemonic that lasts. But what if you forget the mnemonic, right? What if you created a mnemonic but you can't remember it? Now, this does happen sometimes, but what I do to mitigate this is I simply write down the mnemonic in the flashcard that I'm trying to remember the concept. So if I have a flashcard on, for example, like the taxonomic rank, and I have the question saying, name all the ranks or something like that, right? In the answer, I will have all the ranks, but I will also have right at the bottom the mnemonic written out. So that's an easy way to keep the mnemonic there, because over time, because of active recall and spaced repetition, hopefully, which you are doing now, hopefully because of that, you will remember the mnemonic. Can you use mnemonics to remember everything? Simply no, don't do that. Be careful, because you don't want to rely too much on mnemonics. What this can do is lead to a superficial understanding of a topic. Now, I'd recommend only creating mnemonics on things that are like arbitrary pieces of information that doesn't have any logical process or sequence of events that are really hard to remember. That's when I would create a mnemonic, but I wouldn't normally create one. It's very rarely that I make one. Anyway, I hope that makes sense to you. And lastly, I want to talk about is probing. Okay, I'm not trying to get dirty here, but like I'm speaking about it academically, okay? So probing is a study technique that I use. And this is something I came across myself in my academic journey. I realized that I started doing this intuitively, because I didn't realize I was doing this until like I sort of took a third person perspective and I was like, okay, why am I doing this? Probing is basically simply just asking yourself questions. That's it. Questions like, what is going on? Why is that happening? What even is this? Because instead of accepting a fact, you dig deeper. That's what it is. You're just like sort of interrogating that information, like why does this make sense? Like what even is going on? Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's go through an example together. Let's say we're in a biology class and our teacher says to us, okay, we're going to cover diffusion this session. Diffusion is the movement of particles from a high concentration to a low concentration. What you do is you begin to take this information and you try and dissect this information yourself. So the first question is you can ask is, okay, why do particles move from a high to low concentration? Well, okay, particles have a high kinetic energy, and high kinetic energy means that they like rub around with each other and they bump into each other. So over time, naturally, like they would want to spread out. The second question is, how does diffusion even happen? How does that process even occur? Well, okay, diffusion happens because particles have random motion and they move randomly because of the kinetic energy they have. Okay, sweet. Okay, but what influences diffusion? Okay, there's so many things that can influence diffusion. One is temperature. Okay, how does temperature influence diffusion? Do you get it? Like you can just keep going on and on and on. And what this will do is you will just understand that topic in so much detail. And you don't understand like how valuable this is. Like this is honestly like a game changer, because you will understand something so well. Like that's how you remember information, is because you understand it at such a deep level that it becomes ingrained in your mind almost. You can always go a step further. You can always like go and try and teach it to someone, you know, which is the Feynman technique, but that's up to you. Anyway, I hope that made sense as well. So now we've come to the end of the video. I hope you truly found this useful and incorporate all these 5 strategies that I've given you. I am 100% sure if you incorporate all 5, you will increase the chances of you getting A's and A stars and, you know, studying medicine or dentistry or whatever it is you want to study in the future. Remember, these aren't just random tips. This is what I personally used, and it's what got me from a CDD to AAB to neuroscience to now medicine. And one of the best things about these strategies is that you can begin using them immediately today and you will see results. You will see how effective they are and how well they really work. For those of you who are worried about putting in extra hours and seeing results, these techniques aren't about putting in extra hours. It's about taking those hours that we already have for studying and just making them count. With the tips that I've given you, I hope you can completely optimize your study routine. Hopefully you can get more done in less time. Just before I go, I want to quickly mention I made a free ebook you can download right now. Now, the ebook is called Top 3 Productivity Hacks, and in the book I go through productivity hacks that really help me and that I continue to use every single day of my life. I think some of these hacks you might find useful, so if you are interested in that sort of stuff, I'll leave the link in the description below so you can check that out if you want. And if you found this video useful, be sure to give it a like and subscribe, because I'll be making more content similar to this. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one.